when I come to you, the Republican caucus will have selected its nominee for speaker. Dade Phelan, Dustin Burrows, some of these guys are working to try to prevent anyone from winning the caucus, which will be on Saturday. I'm going to talk about where we are at there and then also go through some of the year-end giving that my wife and I are making and the importance of all of us as we consider what we're investing in going into next year. Let's get to the show. A lot is happening. David Spiller endorsed David Cook. There's a lot of Davids in the speaker's race. David Spiller endorsed David Cook on Monday morning. And David Spiller is, I would say, a very respected member of the Texas legislature. He, just for those of you who are wondering the type of things that he's done, he serves on the State Affairs Committee, which is considered to be the most powerful committee, if not one of the most powerful committees in the Texas House. As far as policy goes, it's definitely the most consequential. He also serves on the General Investigating and Ethics Committee, which is a committee that is reserved for individuals that the speaker finds very loyal to him. And David Spiller, while being a fairly conservative member of the caucus, he's always been on the more conservative side of the Republican caucus. He's also worked very closely with the speaker in the past. He was one of the impeachment managers in Ken Paxton's impeachment. And just giving that as an example to show that Spiller is seen and has been regarded as somebody who is or has been in the past aligned with Dade Phelan. And he's also somebody who's considered to be someone who gets tasked with major policy by the speaker, somebody who's put on major committees by the speaker. So he's respected within the circles. He on Monday morning said that he could not vote for Dade Phelan for the reason of Democrat chairmanships, which I'm very grateful for. David Spiller has never voted for Democrat chairs ever since serving in the legislature. He has, anytime he talked about Democrat chairs, he said he thought they were a problem. So this is a consistent position by Representative Spiller that he's taking, and finally coming out and saying, hey, it's time to make a decision. The vote is 5 days away. I'm letting everyone know that I'm voting for David Cook. And this is in addition to 45 public committed votes that David Spiller has. And remember, of the 88 Republicans, 53 have to vote for someone to give them the Republican nomination. And so Dade Phelan is trying to see if he can prevent anyone from getting to 53. That is him and Dustin Burrows and Greg Bonin's plan for them to survive to fight another day. And they believe that if they can prevent anyone from getting the nomination, then they will have an easier time convincing 20 or 25 Republicans to cut a deal with 62 Democrats. And as I'm recording this, it is the 4th, and the Democrat caucus is getting together today to specifically discuss how many of them are ready to commit to Dade Phelan. And so sometime today of the 62, Dade will get a number. They'll say, we have 55 of us, or 50, or 60, or 62. The holdouts are the more progressive caucus within the Democrat caucus. Think of them as the AOCs of the Texas House, John Bryant, Ana Maria Ramos, people like that. Question is, how many of them are holding out for Dade? They want stronger commitments that Dade will kill more conservative policy, right? The rest of the Democrats, what I would do to just accurately represent their position is that Dade Phelan has consistently helped them kill conservative policy, so there's no reason to think he won't continue to help us kill conservative policy. And so we're going to back him. Question is, what is that total number? And that will give Dade the number that he needs to then figure out exactly how many Republicans he needs to be very committed to go into the floor and cutting that deal with the Democrats. And then the question is, can they prevent David Cook from getting 53 votes on Saturday? Because if he's the Republican nominee, then it's much harder to convince all your Republican colleagues to cut the deal with the Democrats against the Republican choice. If he has 50 votes, then they can say, well, it was 50 of the 88, but it wasn't enough to be the nominee. So there is no nominee. So members can vote however they want to vote. So that's the game that's being played. Ultimately, there's something to remember, that you do not control what 88 politicians decide to do. Okay. Whether you're a donor, a grassroots activist, an elected official, even if you're one of the 88, if you work for one of the 88 as their chief of staff or their political consultant, You do not control what 88 politicians decide to do when they walk into that room on Saturday. Will 53 of them say we should come together under a reform initiative represented by the candidacy of David Cook? Maybe. Will some of them say I'm scared and don't want to make a decision and want to stay Switzerland and not let anyone win? Maybe. You don't know. But I will say that you, the grassroots conservatives of Texas, have created an environment that is better than ever when it comes to giving Texas a chance to have a reformed, respected, transparent, and honest Texas House. For that, I'm very grateful. I am so grateful for all of what you have done to help us get to this point. And on Saturday, 88 people are going to walk in and make a decision. You're not going to control them. And we will see what they decide. We know what we need to do. If David Cook wins the nomination, we know what we need to do. If Dade Phelan holds on to enough people to try to cut a deal, the grassroots conservatives in Texas need to stay focused and continue to demand action from the legislature that will enact the conservative policies that we know that not only our neighbors need and our children need and our children's children need, this entire state needs in order to flourish, in order to succeed. So, with that being said, it will take up a lot of time this week and focus. Dominoes will be falling. And if you want more up-to-date information, you can follow me on X. And I'll update y'all as different stuff happens because I won't be coming to you until next week. Let's go to a quick break. And then when we come back, we'll continue this discussion.
America is at a crossroads. Now, more than ever, Texas must step up and lead the country. We don't have time to mess around. The only way to save America is with a strong Texas. You and I know this, but so do the enemies of life and liberty. Therefore, you and I have no choice but to stand up and fight. I'm Sarah Gonzalez, and to the enemies of liberty, I say, come and take it.
Culturally, the Christmas season can be rather materialistic in just the way that our society thinks, considers, walks in, and celebrates this season. I try to encourage everyone to enter the Advent season, which, if you follow the church calendar, is the season we're in. It's the start of the church year. Our church year starts in the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas. And for 4 weeks, we are anticipating the celebration of the coming in Christ incarnate as a baby in a manger, and then also anticipating his second coming, which he has promised. God always fulfills his promises. And it's a season of reminding ourselves about hope and love and joy and peace. Things that were not only delivered through Christ, but things that every single one of us can understand run somewhat countercultural to the season that we find ourselves in. So are we preparing our hearts in the right manner, or are we just kind of coming into this flow of where everybody else find themselves? So some of the things that we do during that time is try to live more generously, try to serve those in need. We have different celebrations about the coming of Christ as opposed to simply the consumption that Christmas so often becomes. And yes, we're even generous with people through giving gifts on Christmas and things like that. I do try to, every year for the last several years, come to you with kind of overviewing some of the year-end gifts that my wife and I are making. And everyone's going to do their giving differently. I will tell you that we do not consider the political giving, even if it's nonprofit or other things, in our kind of tithe that we give. I also always want to give the disclaimer that if you're not giving to your local church that you're in. So if you're in a local church and you're not giving toward that local church, if you're considering any year-end gifts, I would consider maybe even giving the entirety of that to your local congregation that God has planted you in. And I hope that you would do that before looking at any other entities and organizations that you're giving to. And we will also consider the Christian ministries we get involved with as part of that tithe. But anything we're giving towards politics or policy or things like that are extra and on top of and in addition to. So there's various ways of breaking out the seasons of life that you're in. One that I took from a philanthropist is the learner, earner, returner model. My dad has the model of a man that he learned at a men's conference very early in his faith, which was education and training for the first 25 years, business and babies for the next 25 years, and elder statesman, city father, public servant for the last 25. So kind of this, again, learner, earner, returner model. If you're in my season, you're in the earner or the business and babies phase. And so, yes, while you're trying to contribute towards things that are meaningful and important, you also have a lot of child expenses that other people don't have later in life. You also have not, invested much at this point. And so maybe you're not getting the kind of earnings off of those investments that could lend yourself to a more generous end of the year decisions. But I do want every single one of us to think about the importance of actually believing that part of what we do with the money that we earn is give back. And part of that is tithe and our calling to our local churches. But then the other part is to issues and movements that are really important. And we need to invest towards those. The reason Colin Allred could have $100 million to run for Senate is because a massive amount of people all across this country that are mostly Marxists and socialists are like, I will chip in $25 to try to take back Texas. And that adds up over time. So even if you're in the learner phase or the earner phase or the returner phase, consider these things. Okay. So I'm going to go through some of those. Of course, Trinity San Antonio is the local church plant that my wife and I have been involved with for several years. So even though we do tithe, we sometimes look at the end of the year to see if there's a little extra we can give towards that. Trinity San Antonio is, we joined this church at 20 people. It's now right at about 100 congregants. And so we're very blessed to be part of what God is doing there. If you're in a church, it's always important to remember that God's the one who builds the church. We don't build the church. We don't design certain programs that build the church. God builds the church, and then we have to consider how we are stewarding our time, talent, and treasure in the church that we've been planted in. If you live in San Antonio and don't have a church you're attending, come by. One of the ministries that I'll be donating to at the end of the year, Misha and I will be donating to, already have donated to in some of our year-end giving, is American Reformer. American Reformer, it is a Protestant publication, which I think has done a very good job articulating in various forms and hosting a lot of very important conversations. More importantly, I really enjoy the work they've done specifically towards holding different Christian institutions accountable, looking at the different leftward drift amongst some Christian universities. We have a lot of Christian universities that are longstanding institutions and that have different pressures from the outside to have leftward drift, especially with like critical race theory and other critical theory elements that can sometimes seep into higher education. It shouldn't be seeping in to Christian higher education. And so American Reformer is doing some wonderful work in that area. We also will be making a year-end donation to Texans for Vaccine Choice, which was an organization that was a lot harder to say you or less popular to say you were part of when we first started being involved in that movement and giving towards that organization. But Misha and I are making a contribution towards that because it is really important to us that our children still have the freedom to engage in medicine without having to had fallen into everything that Dr. Fauci said. And you have to recognize that in the state of Texas, we still have individuals that are denied life-saving organ transplants if they haven't been completely up to date on every single vaccine that Dr. Fauci said they should get. Did you know that? Did you know that in Texas, you can come and they can say, we have an organ and you are dying, and we are not going to give you that organ unless you're fully vaccinated. It's nuts. And these are the type of issues that Texans for Vaccine Choice has been willing to push and hold elected officials accountable for. The True Texas Project is an organization up in North Texas, which many of you are familiar with, but they do phenomenal organizing of grassroots conservative organizations across Texas. And so we'll be making a year-end contribution to them. American Moment is a federal organization run by Saurabh Sharma, who actually is from Texas. And so he has done, I think, great work in trying to build up and catechize and train and credential hundreds of individual staffers. So we talk about some organizations are trying to recruit the undersecretary to a certain position, and some organizations have been doing a lot of the busy work of making sure that there are staffers ready to staff the different administrations, not just at the higher levels, but also at the mid levels and the entry levels. And that is one of the things that American Moment has done very well. And we have been a supporter of their work for a long time and have made another year-end contribution to them as well. We started monthly contributing towards Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, which is an organization I've talked about a lot. I've had them on this program, but we did recently re-sign up for a monthly contribution to that organization and also made a year-end contribution to Texas Scorecard. Aha, brought to you by Texas Scorecard. Here you go, the Luke Macias Show. But Texas Scorecard is building and growing, and it can only do that with the continued support of Texans all across the state. Texas Scorecard is growing rapidly in a time where legacy media outlets are on the decline. But if we think that legacy media is dead, we're fooling ourselves. And yes, in this last election cycle, we had all these conversations about how legacy media has less influence than other. And then we had the year of the podcast with Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn and Andrew Schultz and all these people who had JD Vance on and Donald Trump on, and it shook up the media landscape. But the media landscape has been getting shaken up for years. Yes, MSNBC is hurting, but these things are not gone. And as they fall down, if the right institutions don't rise up to fill the void in conversation, we won't necessarily be better off. It'd be hard to get worse off when the legacy media has the attention and eyeballs and ears of many of our citizens. But we need to make sure that conservative media is also right in front of them. And you're not just going to replace the old legacy media model with a right legacy media model. You're going to have these non-traditional models like what Texas Scorecard has built. And I'm excited that we grow every single month. I'm excited that more of you tune into this show, or more of you subscribe and start getting the Texas Minute, or more of you start just reading more routinely on different social media platforms. That's exciting to me because it's also trickling down. Texas Scorecard is one of the groups that we are giving to at the end of the year. We also signed up for a monthly contribution to Texas Gun Rights, which I will tell you that if you think our gun rights are fine in Texas, it's how do I say this? So recently I looked at some public polling on gun policy issues. Recently I looked at some private polling on gun policy issues, not public polling. This is not polling that has been released publicly, but private polling on different gun policies. And Texans, I'll give you the good news and the bad news. The good news is that Texans fundamentally believe in the Second Amendment right, and they fundamentally don't want gun control. If you ask them, broadly speaking, do you want gun control? They say no. Do you like the Second Amendment? Yes. That's good. Unfortunately, though, when you get into certain specific policies, the way the left frames those policies, voters often shift and move. A lot of the independent voters and some of the more moderate Republican voters. And so we are always very susceptible to moderates teaming up with Democrats and selling out gun rights slowly and methodically in Texas. And so that's why even as we were looking at our year-end stuff, it wasn't a large contribution, but we signed up for a small monthly donation to Texas Gun Rights because I really do believe that we have a problem with letting those rights slip away over the next 10 years if we're not really careful. And I think Texas Gun Rights has done a fantastic job advocating on that issue here in the Lone Star State. Another contribution that we decided to make at the end of the year is Christian Halls International. This is an organization that I think is doing some very innovative work within the Christian education space, K through 12, a little bit of college, but doing a really good job going in and giving more communities more creative ways to foster learning environments and create these local schools. And so they're doing some pretty awesome work. And we made a year-end contribution to Christian Halls International as well. And so as I look at the broader landscape of where things are, I see a need to continue to be on offense on all these issues. When I look at how Texas got more red, I look and say, well, if we don't actually advance a lot more conservative policy, then we're going to be in a much worse position. We caught the football, now we need to run into the end zone. And the right is historically bad at enacting our policy when it comes to mandate victories. The left, if you give them a mandate victory, they take it all and they run with it and they get so many wins on the board. One of the reasons the speaker's race is important is because we actually believe we need to put wins on the board at a more aggressive pace than we have over the last several cycles, while Dade Phelan and Dustin Burrows and these people in the House have been trying to tap the brakes on so much of it. So I'm hopeful. But I don't even want to say that, oh, well, as long as you get a new speaker, everything's good. Of course it's not. It just means that the environment is so much better for you, the grassroots of Texas, to continue to advocate for the issues that you know you need to see enacted into law this session, and that those policies have a better chance, because when you make the legislative process more transparent and more honest and more Republican and less Democrat run, you're going to get more wins on the board. But these organizations are really important, and we should be trying to live generously. And we should be thinking about investing into those things, even if it is $10 a month, even if it is $10,000 at the end of the year. And I know a lot of you who listen to this program are somewhere in between those numbers. Actually, some of you higher than those numbers. So it's all over the spectrum. But the question is, what are you doing with what you've been given? As a steward of what you have, are you being generous, and are you trying to think, how am I investing into these things? That number can get larger as you get older, as you don't have expenses for childcare, as you don't have expenses, as you own your home, or kind of own your home in Texas, since you constantly have to pay rent to the government, but as you at least don't have your mortgage payment anymore, and you just have the mortgage payment to the government in the form of property taxes. All of these things change with seasons of life. But I would hope, and what I want to encourage you to do, and what I want to try to live out, and my wife and I as our family, is that we would still try to live generously and make intentional investments into the things that we believe and care about. Because these are, I believe, entities and organizations that are working hard to actually accomplish, and they're doing things that I don't have time to do. I have to drive all across the state. I have speaking engagements to do. We have, the things we do with our church. I have 4 of my 6 siblings that live within 15 minutes of us, and my wife has 7 siblings that live within 15 minutes of us, and we've got school, and we've got homework with the kids. And so all these things mean that I'm not the one that can necessarily be sitting down with newly elected officials talking about important healthcare policy for next session, or talking about what the path to property tax relief looks like. And if other people aren't spending a lot more of their time, talent, treasure, and efforts in those endeavors, then we're not going to get them across the finish line. But I hope that next week when I come to you, I have more positive news to share regarding the current status of the speaker's race. And in the event that enough Republicans hold out for the status quo to prevent a Republican nominee who's a reformer from being victorious on Saturday, then I will explain what that means for how we continue to move forward. Not in some doom and gloom manner, because you don't control what 88 politicians do. So don't let it be something that you worry about. Let it be something that you follow, engage in, and try to fight for the things you care about. Don't be anxious. Anxiety is crushing. I hope this Advent season is a time of generosity for you. I hope it is a time of focusing on the things that were delivered and promised in the coming of Christ, which is hope and joy and peace and love. And when you see a nativity scene, I hope you remember that that is something separate from the vast majority of the Christmas season. And it's something that sets us apart. We are a nation that was founded on Christian principles. And now we get to be in a season where we celebrate the coming of Christ incarnate as the Son of God, here to seek and save the lost. Merry Christmas, happy Advent. May God bless you, and may God bless Texas.
Do you want to get your news from people who share your values? Texas Scorecard, real news for real Texans.